Noting the hour in the presence of a quorum, I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is public participation. Seeing no one in the public, we'll move on to the town first quarter report. Are you ready, Brian?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's a little belated, but I noticed last year it was December 13th, so I beat it by a day. So we're improving. So just
for the record, you were ready. I canceled the meeting, so.
Make sure this clip is on. So the data that you're going to find in this report is posted on the town's webpage under the budget heading. Typically, it's in an Excel spreadsheet, Excel format. I just kind of given a brief presentation, kind of just a quick overview, but all the details there for your review. So, first quarter results, we had total revenue of $87.5 million of what we went to town meeting. The year-to-date collection is 25.7%. So we're trending right where we want to be, a little bit better than we did last year. Why? Who really knows? It's, you know, it's the different components, you know, but we're where we should be. So property tax collections, 79.8%. We're trending at 29.8 million, and we're trending at 21 million, or about 26.3%. So again, it's kind of ahead of the game. Compared to last year, we're beating that projection as well. State aid accounts for $1.6 million, year-to-date $481,000, or 30%. Again, pretty much tracking where we were last year. MSBA, $923,000. As you can see, we have received nothing to date. That payment comes in January in one lump sum, so it's consistent with last year as well. Local receipts, $5.2 million, trending at 1.1, 21.2%. Footnoted there is, motor vehicle accounts for about $3.3 million, and that comes in the third quarter. We bill that typically in January, February, due sometime in March, so we won't see that until a little later. So that accounts for a big portion of that. And if you notice at the bottom there, our free cash was certified for June 30th, 2017 at $3.86 million.
Microphone.
Excuse me. So the difference between the percentage of budget from 17 and 18, I guess there are two ways to look at it. One way is that if it's a higher percentage in 18, that we're collecting faster than last year. Another way to look at it is our budget really is low compared to what it really should be. And if we use the same percentage, we can expect that we're going to get more than what we budgeted. Do you think it's more to one side or the other, or equally between those two reasons?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a big differences between them, Jeff. I hear what you're saying. I really don't think, it's probably a combination of the two. I hear what you're saying, because last year's local receipts, I think, were $4.8 million as opposed to 5.2. So that could be thrown off percentages. Last year was 16%, this year was 21.2. So, yeah, absolutely. But I couldn't tell you exactly, but I'm assuming it would be a combination of the two.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, how's the meals tax looking for Q1?
It's a good question. I think on the ALG plan, we had the meals tax originally estimated at 270. We didn't hit the first year's projection. It was kind of a slow kickoff, so we estimated at 250, and it came in at about 309. So we're doing quite well. So let's keep going to our local restaurants.
Speaking of meals tax, I saw a sign at Market Basket in Littleton that said, if you have your lobster steamed, we're going to charge you a meals tax now, as opposed to just paying for the lobster. I'm just suggesting maybe you might want to check with the local supermarkets to see if they actually steam things or do any kind of preparation like that, whether they're paying meals tax on it.
So moving along the expense side, so the town's operating budget was $33,151,899. The year-to-date expenditures are $12,153,609. We're trending at 36.6. It's a little down from last year. You're saying, well, if we're a quarter through the year, why is that 36.6%? It seems significantly high. One of the things that, that we do in government, or at least in some of our operations, is if we know we have a known bill, for instance, we're getting 12 months of electric bills, we pretty much look at the prior year and we put a PO out there, so we encumber that all. So that's in that number. So it's not just 3 months of expenditures. In some cases, there's 12 months of expenditures, or there might be 6, depending on the individual department head. But that's why you're going to see that number up higher. Frankly, it's kind of the trend that we typically see. It doesn't give us any kind of reasons for any kind of concern. So. Jeff?
So for my education, expenditure does not mean cash flow. It doesn't even mean payables. It means it's been, a PO has been let for that amount of money.
So
it may not even be ultimately bought. So at the end of the year, we may have expenditures that then disappear because we put a PO out, but we didn't actually buy it.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the department head and how they handle it. Yeah, we monitor that.
So a note to all members, when you start pouring through the detail of line items of expenses for year-to-date versus the budget, don't go crazy, because there's both what has been spent and what is encumbered, meaning what is committed. And so when you do those percentage analysis, running rates, sometimes they don't work out very accurately.
Right, but most of us from industry are familiar with, when you incur the liability, so it's either paid or accounts payable, right. and that's what we consider an expenditure. That's why I was asking. It seems like there's a third leg to this, which is, and we've already officially set it aside, even though we may or may not encumber it. Do it. So that's kind of interesting.
It's not like the private sector.
So moving on to our enterprise funds, this is where it kind of gets interesting. So the first of them is septage. So we went to town meeting with a budget of $194,274. Footnoted there, if you look, it includes $32,000 of retained earnings for vehicle replacement. That budget's up significantly higher than the year prior, and that's part of the reason why they also had a fee increase there as well. The year-to-date revenues are a little light at 13.5. Again, most of their action occurs in the spring and in the summer, so we'll see a lot of that later in the year and not in the early part of the year. It is a little bit lighter than it was in the prior year at 20%. On the expense side, their expenses are 22.8%. A lot of that is payroll as well. A good portion of this budget is payroll, so part of the Board of Health, part of the health department's salaries are also being paid out of there. And if you look, it's pretty much trending where it was last year, so there's no concerns here. Their free cash was certified at 6/30/2017 at $125,120, so they get a pretty significant healthy fund balance there as well. So moving on to transfer station and recycling, their budget was $689,511. Again, footnoted, of which $77,419 was from retained earnings that was pledged. The year-to-date revenue was $270,109, so we're trending at 39.1, a little bit better than we did last year. Most of the monies that we see in transfer and recycling comes in September and October, so it's when the stickers are due for the annual re-up if you have a transfer station sticker. And so that accounts for a good portion of that revenue. So you're going to see that slightly, trending as we go forward where it should be as the year goes on. The profit and loss right now is showing that we're making money. Their expenses are $178,451 at 25 or 26%. So that's right where it should be. Again, their free cash balance as of 6/30/2017, $509,991. Again, a very nice, healthy fund balance.
Do you have a internal quarterly budget that you don't necessarily publish to the town, but to reflect things like that so that you can do cash flows?
Yeah, so every month, Jeff, the town accountant prints out a your budget summary, and she sends it to the department head, so we review those on a regular basis, just to see if there's anything that gives us any kind of concern, and also to advise the department head of where their budget looks like in the big picture.
So the question was, though, does the transfer station have 4 quarters of budget and know that 80% of its revenue comes in the second quarter, because that's when the stickers are done, and so he knows his goal is to
Yeah.
get.
Yeah, when you get to Q2, you're gonna find that most of that revenue is collected through the second quarter. So, I don't know what the percentage is, but the bulk of that's all gonna be through Q1 and Q2. And then it slows down because the second half of the year is gonna be either new people moving into town, they're getting a sticker, or second stickers, and so on and so forth. And then also the recycling portion of it, so, because,
Okay, but what I'm still trying to get to, does the people at the transfer station have a Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 breakout of the 689,000? Or is the only guidance they have, last year we got 30% by September 30th, so if we're better than that this year, then we're doing better than last year?
oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you, off the top of my head. I don't. Well, I mean, we could look at it that way. I mean, we haven't, but I hear what you're saying.
Well,
No.
I don't know that it needs to be more granular for town
Well.
meeting, but certainly to run, especially for cyclical kind of places where it's not 1/12, 1/12, 1/12.
And it's a relatively new program too, as you know. So I know Corey York, the highway director, is still trying to get his handle on the whole budget and where it was going. It seems to be settling in. The budget we'll be presenting this year is actually coming down from this one as well. So this year's budget was at 689. I think this year it's coming in just over 600,000. So we're seeing the budget coming down as well. Part of that is because, we had the trash haulers, that we had to pay for was contractual services. Well, if we're not producing the trash, we don't need to pay the consultant to haul the trash off. So he doesn't need that budgetary cap. So we're seeing that come down. So there's a lot of things changing here. So that's happening with the trash itself, and then you have the other side of that, the flip side, which is the recycling component. So we're seeing trash coming down, but recycling going up. So we're still trying to get our hands wrapped around it, but I think it's good news in the big picture. So I think we're conserving, we're saving money, we're saving trash, and we're doing more recycling. So the sewer enterprise fund, very efficient. We get a budget of $1,813,732. A good portion of this is through the betterments on the actual tax bills is how we're funding this, as well as we have the actual loan servicing going through here as well. So we've got that coming through the revenue source, through the tax bills and the quarterly bills, through the betterment surcharges. So it's pretty self-sufficient. Right now it's showing a loss of $111,000, but that's primarily because that $587,000 is a contract with Woodard & Curran, who's our consultant that handles the sewer station down on Adams Street. So that contract in and of itself is about a little over $500,000. Here's an example. We encumber that all on day one. We're under contract. We know what that expense is. We encumber that all on day one, so that's in that number. If you look, the year-to-date revenues at 26.3. Last year was trending at 23%. We're right where we should be. And the expense side, same thing, 33% this year, or 32% versus last year, 33%. So no concerns here. We got a fund balance as of 6/30/17, $1,192,000. So very healthy fund balance there. Ambulance Enterprise Fund, $1,367,624, up pretty significantly from the year before. If you remember, this is the first year we went ALS, so we had some ALS expenditures in here. They were one time. We pledged a significant amount of money from retained earnings. If you look at the bottom here in the footnote, $314,000 from returned earnings, and we also had a $200,000 general fund support there as well. That, when we first started this particular business, or this enterprise fund, was about $271,000. That has come down. In fact, in 2017, we did away with the general fund support, but there is a need there. Clearly, it is not self-sufficient. One of the things that we will recognize this year, and you'll see a change, is on the revenue side, because we are going ALS. We had a soft opening, but that's clearly going to give us a bump in the revenue side of things. So the year-to-date revenue is trending at 27.9%. Last year was 23. Again, we had a soft opening. We really didn't go ALS until, I think, the beginning or the middle of September. But we'll realize, some more income. I think once we see Q2 results, I think you're going to see a change. Right now, it's running a small deficit, 3,757. Again, a lot of that's due to the expense we had up front. Jeff?
Yeah, sorry to keep asking questions, but this is the first time I've ever had a chance to learn about this. In the previous slide, you said that the expenses were so large because you encumbered the full amount for the year of that contract. In this slide, there's $500,000 budgeted of revenue, but it doesn't appear that you put that all into the revenue side on day one, even though it was budgeted for. How much of the 381 actually is of the 334 and the 200,000?
Yeah, so the $200,000 here is on the revenue piece. The retained earnings is only, we moved it at the end of the fiscal year because we may not need, even though we pledged 314 at town meeting, we may not need all of it. So we do a journal entry at the end of the fiscal year. But the $200,000 is moved in on day one.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Transportation fund, so we had a budget last year, or this year, $574,477. Again, footnoted, $231,000 from general fund support, and then $117,000 from commuter lot revenues. Here, Jeff, that's all moved in on day one. So the year-to-date revenues of $380,000, it looks great, 66.2%. It's trending very nice, but you're gonna see Q2 and Q3, you're gonna see that percentage, coming down a little bit as time goes on, obviously, because we pushed that all in there on day one. On the expense side, we're at 18.2, so we're less than we should be. All in all, Doug's done a pretty good job at trying to maintain this and balance this. If you look, we ended up this year with a certified fund balance of $29,835. So we monitor this budget because it's a relatively new program. So we really do a lot of monitoring on this, and I think we're going to be okay here. So, well, that's it. So, any other questions?
Anybody but Jeff have a question?
Brian, I do. I noticed on these, the revenues and expenses are the same in budgeting. They're assumed to break even for the year, and yet they've all got positive free cash balances at this point, some fairly substantial. Does that imply that, is that an accumulation of favorable variances over the years?
Yeah, so what happens, let's kind of bring one up, Tom, as an example. Let's go to something simple, like here, the septage fund. So for instance, if we go into town meeting, we're always presenting a balanced budget. We have to. We can't show the budget, obviously, out of balance. So we're anticipating that our revenues are 194, our expenses are 194. So in this particular case, if our revenues come in at $200,000 and our expenses are at 175, then the 25 goes to the fund balance. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
The last slide, that $117,000 of revenue from parking, is that retrospective? In other words, so at the end of last year, it was $117,000, so now you apply it to
Which one, Joe?
next year? The last one. The very last slide, the parking transportation.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
It says, so you said 231's already been put in the revenue and 117.
And the 117 was also put in revenue.
But those funds, was that the certified revenue from prior year that you're going to apply now to next year?
Yeah,
It's not this year's revenue, so it's...
No, so the 231 is obviously an appropriation at town meeting that gets moved in on day one. So the commuter lot revenue, it's a special revenue fund, so it doesn't have a certified free cash balance. State Department of Revenue doesn't certify it, but we do a snapshot, and so we know what their fund balance is. So it is what it's pledged from the prior year's fund balance.
That was I getting at.
That's correct.
So is it fair to say that's the full fund balance from the prior year of the revenue, commuter lot?
It's only a portion of it. The 117 is a small portion of the commuter lot fund.
So the committee would love to know how much money is sitting in that other cushion of money that we don't necessarily
Our
see.
official term for it was coined by Doug Tyndall years ago. It's called puddles of money.
Puddles? Okay.
Yes, and we do, as part of our backup to the budget, we will get the balances of all the puddles that are known. We don't go there. Other questions? You may sit down temporarily, Brian.
Thank you.
I'll ask Jason to give us an update on the ALG meeting since I wasn't there and he was.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of notes. This was a short. You missed a short one. We were done early for a change. First thing that came up, just a quick rundown on where things are, similar to what Brian just did. Everything was what they said. Everything's basically on track. Schools are on the ups, on the good side on revenue by about $200K. This was mostly because of $10 more per pupil in state aid than was originally projected. The original projection was to use the absolute minimum possible, and this came in $10 more per pupil. So I think it's, I want to say it's $35 per pupil, but it's 10 more than absolute minimum. There was a conversation about how the percentage of students in their schools that qualify as, and I want to make sure I get my terminology correct here, economically disadvantaged has crossed to 10% as a district number for the first time ever. For example, at Gates, it's actually 15%, but the district-wide percentage is now above 10%. Paul brought up that only a few years ago it was at 2%. Last year it was at 7%, and this year it's at 10%. A couple of people did mention, though, that the formula for how that calculation of economically disadvantaged has changed in the last couple of years. But despite that change, it still shows a trend. It still shows a direction.
So that formula was the same last year that they're using this year?
Correct.
And same 2 years ago?
I believe so, yes. But I think if you go back 5 years, I don't think it's the same.
Still quite a bit of increase.
Yeah. So 7 to 10 in a year is, I mean, like I say, independent of the fact that this was a recharacterization, it is still showing trajectory and directionality. Let's see. From there, we went directly into a conversation on everyone's favorite topic, reserves, and the draining and filling of the reserves as a result of turnbacks. There was general consensus in raising or being comfortable with a new number of assumed turnbacks that we plug into the ALG spreadsheet. This is a change from years past. Apparently in years past, it's been hard to get them to plug any number in for turnbacks. They showed a chart, which I believe...
I think Brian's going to get into it.
Brian's going to get into it, that shows basically an average replenishment of about $3 million a year. This does set up a conversation that, it depends on how you want to look at it. On the one hand, $3 million replenishment, an argument can be made that that's $3 million that they didn't need, that was more taxed or more budgeted than they necessarily needed. The other end of that argument is you want to make sure that you have the flexibility during the budget year so you don't run out of money during the budget year. And both of the entities were quick to point out that they came within 1% of their budget for the year. So depending on which number you want to look at, this is either fantastic. I mean, I think we'd all be very impressed if we could come in with 1% of our budget in any given year. So definitely kudos to them, both entities, for that. On the other hand, if you're consistently having $3 million in turnbacks, well, that's more like 3% that's more like 3% on $100 million in a year. So where exactly is that discrepancy? I definitely want to throw that out there as something that has not been reconciled amongst the ALG members. The agreed upon number for putting into the ALG spreadsheet this year is 2 million. It's up from 1.3. But if the averages have been 3 million, then that's still light, and they're still being very conservative in their estimations. I haven't had a chance to do this work yet, but I definitely want to try and, with a couple more years under my belt, I want to understand exactly what are the most commonly conservatively forecast numbers between the two entities. Brian, I'm going to accuse you of being conservative always on excise tax, and I'm going to try and do some more research to see if I can credibly state that assuming the minimum in state aid per pupil for Chapter 70 is perhaps a little on the overly conservative side. Something for food for thought. One anecdote that was mentioned that I think is important to share with the group. It was mentioned that a couple of years ago, under a previous school superintendent, it got to be near the end of the school year, and he started to spend the money that he had. And that was counter to the, quote unquote, the way things are done around here. And that was stopped. There was a statement by Bart that the new philosophy, or the stated philosophy, should be to turn back if at all possible, and that is the Acton way. When asked by Bart if everyone would agree with that philosophy, it got suddenly quite quiet in the room. But the anecdote from Paul that the previous superintendent tried to spend year-end monies the way many of us in private industry are used to, that got stopped. By the way, the military is fantastic for that. I love it when the fiscal year ends with a military customer, but I won't go there. The anecdote that the administration stopped that spending is important to know, but I also think, just me personally, I also think that's potentially a risk. It was impressed upon me that with the level of reserves that we have, say we do have a bad year, which is what I'm always afraid of, because the point that I kept trying to make is once we authorize $3 million worth of reserve use, functionally there's no recourse. We can't say, but you promised us a turn back, because that promise means nothing other than it's always been that way. That's great and wonderful, but 2 or 3 years of it's not that way this time can be very damaging. And I was definitely looked on as not being trusting enough that there will be turnbacks, or at least that's how I took it. The meeting minutes are out. You're definitely welcome to read them. I don't know if they're automatically shared with everyone in FinCom.
I think so. We can forward them.
We can forward them. They're public information. The meeting on December 14th was canceled. The meeting that would be on December 14th was canceled. I think we were all looking forward to getting done with special town meeting. And just one fun little thing to throw out there. This year, this special town meeting was translated into Portuguese, Spanish, and simplified Chinese too.
Really?
So,
Well, they had plenty of time. That hurt.
I think that's all I need to share.
Okay. Jeff, you have a question?
Wait for you to finish.
He's done.
Okay. So last year and this year, they had the economic disadvantage numbers were the same basis, they calculated the same way.
Yes.
And so there was a 40% increase from 7% to 10%, which translates into, I don't know, 100 people or 50 people or whatever the number is. The question is did anybody look into any kind of demographic reason, or what was the feeling that this is changing? Because obviously you said 10% is not huge, but it's the trend that we're concerned about. Is there any
I
analysis?
I don't have any analysis. I do know that what was referenced was a United Way study, which I would love to go find more information about. But there was a United Way study that, was referenced as the source for this number.
But I mean, so perhaps if you could share sometime the way the formula is, because,
Make
you
it
know,
work.
I can understand with property values going up, that somebody having now to buy a small little starter home at $450,000 or something is going to be poor from a cash flow point of view, but I don't know if they use that in their formula of that they don't have enough money because mortgage pays, you know, takes up 90% of their income, or whatever the thing is. So it would be important to kind of try and understand the underlying reason for this, just so that, not that we're going to change it, but that we can get ahead of it and understand as the town changes in its compositions, that, you know, what we can expect from our ability to pay taxes, for example. You said that, you know, we rarely have anybody who doesn't pay and goes into tax title. But if, in fact, there's this change around the population that is growing to a below the poverty level, or whatever that number is, then that might, in fact, impact the ability of the citizens to pay their taxes.
By way of background, Bart is Bart Wendell, who's been the moderator of ALG for, I guess, since ALG started some 20 years ago. So he's got a lot of history. The players change, but Bart remains the same. And yes, if you go back 10 years or more, there was no such thing as turnbacks. There would be kind of a orgy of spending in June to make sure that everything that could possibly be spent in the budget got in the fiscal year, which also made nonsense out of our request for, we want the actual spending. They'd say the actual and the budget are always the same. Now, the line items always varied, but, so, yeah, we don't have a lot of history on turnbacks, but I'll let Brian address the issue, and he'll give you the same information the ALG was given. And I'm ready. Are you ready? Yeah, that's fine. I wanted them to basically hear as much as possible what ALG has.
It's very dry, it's not very exciting. So, reserve replenishment, where does it come from? So, as we had mentioned, we have turnbacks or unspent budgets. Also, we have revenues that exceed our projections. Jason, for instance, motor vehicle, we project, or DOR has us projecting what we get in the prior year, and that's pretty much what we're stuck with. So, yeah. So, in the third category would be statutory adjustments. Kind of a large category of a lot of things happening here. So what are the statutory adjustments? So these would be closed encumbrances, so POs at the end of the year that you may not have used, you know, so you've encumbered $1,000, but at the year end you only spent $980 and you're not going to spend the extra $20, we close it. It goes to free cash, or it closes out. Changes in state aid. We estimate state aid coming in at X, comes in X plus, that would be one of those. Also, miscellaneous revenues. You're saying, well, what's a miscellaneous revenue? So there's certain revenues that you can't anticipate. Those might be interest from tax title accounts that pay off. So we never know when they're going to pay off. They'll roll in at any given time of the year. So they're non-recurring. And if it's a non-recurring revenue, you cannot estimate it. You can actually count it when you receive it, and then it goes to fund balance or to reserve replenishment. We also have things like tax deferral. So somebody's in a tax deferral program where they're deferring their taxes, and they decide they're going to sell their house and move on. The interest that we collect over that period of time when they're in deferral program would go into this category as well. Again, you can't estimate it. You don't know when it's going to happen. It just happens, and then it rolls again to the free cash calculation or the replenishment, or part of the replenishment. We have changes in liabilities, so there's certain liabilities we carry on the books from year to year. We might have liabilities at one year at $600,000. The subsequent year, that might be $300,000. So when you close that liability out, the delta between those two, again, goes to this calculation. And we also had grant deficits. So for instance, on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, we had grants out there. The state allows you, as long as you have a grant letter, allows you to run those into a deficit. So if we have expenditures and POs and people are working on it, and yet we haven't got that money in, we can go ahead and pay them. We can pay those bills and run it into a negative. So there's changes in those grant deficits from year to year as well. We never know what those changes are going to be. This piece of it's very complex, and it changes every year. It's very dynamic. So it's hard to get a handle on it. So at the last ALG, Steve Barrett was asked to kind of do a 3-year average of where replenishment has been. So this particular slide here shows our 3-year average for 15, 16, and 17. And then obviously to get that average, you divide by the 3. So we're trending at that $3 million replenishment level. There's a lot of different things that go into each and every one of these. I mean, we have broken it down into detail and what is in the FY15, free cash calculation, or that replenishment, I should say, calculation, as well as 16 and 17. But that's really was kind of the gist of the discussion at the last ALG. If we're estimating replenishment, I think Jason, you said 1.3 million, and our average for the last 3 years is at 3 million. Are we being too conservative, and should we raise it? And so I think the consensus is to raise that to that $2 million level. We could do a look back at 5 years or 10 years, whatever anybody thinks the appropriate trend is, or we should look at. But you have pretty much what was presented at that ALG. So I don't know if you want to add anything else, Jason, but this was pretty much it, I think, in a nutshell.
No, the only thing that I do want to add is I do need to figure out how to square the circle of each entity saying they came within 1% of their budget, which they have evidence of. And then if you take 3.9 plus the $500,000 that the schools turned back, added to their E&D, that's 4.5%. So on 100 million. So there's a
replenishment, not turn back, but in replenishment.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So that's something I need to figure out how to square, because that's different.
Part of the answer might be if we knew the breakout of, you said there are 3 components to each.
Those 3 major components,
right,
yeah, right.
There's expense, revenue, and statutory. And if most of it was statutory, then everybody could be within 1% of their expense, but all those statutory things drove it to the 4%. So is there a rough sizing, it's not 30, 30, 30, what percent of that?
That's a good point, Jeff, and I think looking back, so let's take 15 at $2.8 million, and I think a good portion of that, or maybe the greater portion of that, was actually a turn back. So you never know which category you just don't know, you really don't. When you're looking at, your revenues, that exceed projections, for instance, we had Insulet that came into town here, and they came in for a building permit, and you'll see it this year, and for us, for 17, and a portion of it came in for 18. That was a one-time hit, and that permit, I think, for Insulet, when it's all said and done, was $800,000 or $900,000. It was broken into 2 pieces, but that's you're not going to see that again, So, and you can't anticipate that, and you can't estimate for that because you don't know if it's going to happen. So it's those types of things that we don't really have any control over.
So my comments would be, first, I'd like to see it, and I know you guys have this information because John, a couple of years ago, broke out some of this by category.
We did.
So yeah, break it out amongst whatever actually expense underruns, revenue over budget, and statutory adjustments. To the extent statutory adjustments are significant in the year, you better be able to explain what the nature of the statutory adjustment was. I would like to go back 5, maybe 7 years. I don't want to go back 10 years simply because I remember 10 years ago and we didn't have much in the way of turnbacks in those years. However, as Jason just said, if we're within 1% of budgets, that's a good number. I'm happy with it. If it's 4% off, then I'm not happy with it, you know.
But
We're not, the pencils aren't sharp enough.
But I think if you say, pretend it was a third, 1% of budget, 1% of revenue, and 1% in statutory, now you're at 3% total, and that's why you're having this difference between what they
It
say.
could be, I just want to see the data. And I do believe Brian's right, it varies from year to year. To Jason's point, if we start talking about $3 million in assumed replenishment on a $100 million budget, but of worse with a town with only $3.8 million in free cash, that 1 year it doesn't happen, we're in deep trouble. And yeah, I would like it split out between the town and the schools, because in effect, I have no control over what the schools do. So if you could do that, you'd make me very happy.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? John, you know something about this.
Would you have a breakout of the $3 million number? How much of it was school and how much of it was town?
The $3 million.
The average turnback number.
The turnback.
It's
Sorry, not
all,
turnback, replenishment.
it's all town, because anything that's not finished would go to E&D. There's another $500,000 that went to E&D that's outside of this.
Okay, so that $3 million is
Yeah,
town then?
Let's ask.
Yeah, that replenishment, Jason, is the school's E&D as well. So when
Okay,
in
that
the
includes-
ALG plan, on that,
Okay.
on the free cash tab, you're
Okay.
gonna see both those components in there. You're gonna see the E&D replenishment, and you're gonna see the town's replenishment. Collectively, it's the $3 million
Okay,
on
thank you.
average.
Okay.
So again, we need to look at some history, because I know even 5 years ago, the schools weren't throwing off much.
Marie,
In fact, they were using it. you know,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there was a long history in the last month of the school year to just spend it away, and I think it's only been probably the last 10 years that they've been honorable about that.
Even, help me out, Dave, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, they got dinged by Moody's for using their E&D?
Just over two.
So, if you look beyond the last couple of years, you're going to see a very different pattern. Okay, you're off the hook.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along, guys. This could be a record. FY19 budget process. So for you people that can't wait for Christmas morning and shake your presents to see if you can figure out what's in them, on Thursday night, the superintendent will present his preliminary budget to the school committee. And the following Monday, the town manager will present his budget to the Board of Selectmen. So if you want to get a preview, and at that point, the backup, I'm assuming the backup data will be available as of the budget books and things like that, which aren't really books, they're electronic, but yeah, will be available at that point. Again, I would caution you, if you're going to go to either of these sessions, don't sit in groups of more than 3. Don't be seen talking about it. Don't make, oh my God, type reactions. So that's what's going on. Behind your agenda, there's a couple of pages on the school budget, because their information was already out in their packet, which was posted 48 hours in advance of the meeting. So I just took a couple of pages out. The first one shows their expenses which they are budgeting an increase of 4% over FY18. Obviously, there's a few differences here with our point of view where we said 3%, this is 4% operating, and even though it's a very low number on benefits because of healthcare, compensation is still well over 4% in total, salary and benefits. Now, there are a few things going on here. They have I think for them to implement the change in starting times, they need to have a one-time only expense on buses. They need to add more buses and more drivers, which is in this budget. But they seem to also be increasing their E&D use to at least partially offset that. But again, it's 4% operating, whereas our point of view said 3%. And the second two pages are working through the table 6. Remember what table 6 is, Christy?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Again, on a preliminary basis, the Acton assessment will be going up 5.1%, and Boxborough will be decreasing by less than 1%. So there's a lot to chew on there. In the last sheet, I just literally wrote in some hand calculations based on this on the last ALG plan, and so if we were looking at a deficit of 1.8, or almost 1.9 million for FY19, this would translate into maybe a 1.4 million deficit, so it's less. But there'll be a lot more details to follow. As far as the process goes, like I said, you may or may not attend those meetings. There will be more backup and budgets information than you ever hoped to see provided to you. The procedure is you can review that at your leisure. I know you have nothing else to do over the next couple of weeks, but any questions that you wish to pose to either the town or the schools should first come to me. And my role in this is to weed out any duplicate questions so that they're not getting the same question 11 times, and to kind of group them into categories so that they can be parceled off and answered more efficiently. We may get answers before the budget Saturday, which is what day? January 6th for the town. It's later on in the month for the schools. We may not. We may get all the information just prior to the budget Saturday, but you will get answers. The sooner you get questions to me, the sooner I'll get them to the parties. And hey, Jeff, you had a question?
Just, I don't know the process of Budget Saturdays, so is that when they present to this committee and we ask questions, or is it when all of us, is it sort of an enlarged ALG?
So Budget Saturday, it takes a different format for the town than it does for the schools. So for the town, what will happen is it'll be a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. And each department head will come in and they will discuss what's different about what's new, any new hires, any new capital, anything driving any increase in their budget. And they'll come in one at a time, usually in about 15, 20-minute slots, and it takes from about 8 in the morning till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. But yes, you can ask questions at that time. So you can ask questions in writing and get responses, and when the department head comes in, if you still have questions, you can direct your questions directly to that person. And they feed us. However, you do not get a break. You have to fix whatever you want on your plate and eat it. And it is unhealthy stuff.
Sandwiches. Perfectly healthy sandwiches.
Coffee runs out early.
Coffee runs out way too early.
Bring your own, yeah.
And the wine is, domestic, not imported.
And the school committee is different Saturday?
School committee's budget Saturday, we are invited to, but we are not participants, okay? So it's the school committee dealing with all their principals and department heads in probably a bit more detail than the town goes through the department heads, but, so we, the good news is you don't have to be there. Nobody knows if you're there or not. But you don't have any special status. If you want to ask a question, you'll certainly be recognized by the school committee chair to ask a question, but.
So there's is it generally open to the public then?
It is absolutely, both of these meetings are open to the
Absolutely
public.
open. But somehow the front row is the finance, so I mean, they know who we sit together, or we're not allowed to have more than 2 people together, so. Are we just asking questions as citizens, or how does that
If
work?
I post the meeting, then it's a meeting. We can sit together and
That's all we want.
we can do all we want, but,
And the seats are hard and uncomfortable.
yeah, and the food is about the same, actually.
Everyone brings stuff to the school site.
Do you have a date on that?
I do, but I don't have it in front of me. January,
Texting Amy.
January 27th at 8 a.m. in RJ Gray.
so, schools in the junior high, the town is this,
Right here.
in this building, in this room.
Town's right here.
8 o'clock for the schools. And the garden will be 8 o'clock, isn't it?
Yeah, 8:30. If you want coffee, 8, you know.
Right here.
Mike?
Yeah, my only comment about the RJ Gray location is you won't be able to hear anything that's going on. The acoustics are terrible,
They're not
especially
great.
if you're an old guy.
Your mics are terrible. I can't tell what falls on the microphone.
Yeah, it's not unlike a school committee meeting in terms of acoustics. So that's pretty much how it works. At the conclusion of those, we will then discuss how we feel about the budgets, about how close they are to our point of view, whether we have a reason to deviate from our point of view at that point. And in late February, we will hold a public hearing on both budgets. And we will have, again, presentations from both sides. And in the meantime, ALG will be meeting, we're going back and forth about what each and every party can live with. And eventually, by about the first week in March, some consensus will be reached. Questions? Comments from the veteran members? Have I characterized the process fairly well? Okay. Yeah, Dave.
I would add that the majority of the people that present from the town are really knowledgeable, so if you come having done some of your homework beforehand with some questions, it's usually can be really informative. Just get background in whatever area that you may be interested in.
Yeah, there have been some pretty good discussions. A lot of them are pretty cut and dried and straightforward, but I know most of us don't have a chance to talk to the police chief or the fire chief on a regular basis about things going on in town. And it can be very interesting to hear their points of view about what's going on. So, not that the finance department isn't absolutely fascinating, but they control the schedule and they always go on last when everybody is pretty well wasted. So, you do. I mean, has it ever been that you guys didn't go on last? So yeah, as soon as you get the details, you can start going through it. Again, any questions you have, you can not only questions that you want answered, but any questions you have about the backup and the data, I'm happy to answer. Oh yeah, the other reason you work the questions through the chair is the chair can then delicately tell you it's a dumb question and not pass it on. So that never happens.
Sure it does.
Only to you.
Only from me.
So, with that, God, we may get out of here. Finance Committee business. Chair has a question. Did anybody take minutes at our pre-town meeting? You missed it. Did anybody take the minute? So, we did not, actually. So, I think you were the only one who wasn't there. So, just write up something that said we convened at 6 o'clock. Jason and I covered what had happened at the moderator's pre-town meeting, and we adjourned about 6:20, as I recall.
You didn't adjourn us.
Oh, that's right, we didn't adjourn, we continued.
We went to go get our clickers at 6:20. The only thing that we did go over very, very briefly was who's covering which article. That's the main thing that we spent our time on.
Committee reports. Use your microphone.
The last APC meeting, which was last Thursday, I did not attend because of family being sick. But I did attend the one, excuse me, 11/16. They have 17 requests this year. So and obviously they don't have as much money as being requested. So they're starting their process of interviewing the applicants and determining what, they're going through their process. They had a state match of $956,455, which is the lowest so far, because of more towns joining. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, that sounds like a big number.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. 956,455 was the revenue from taxes, and 164,537 was the state match of, so 17.2% match in the state. So that's gone down considerably due to more towns joining. They had a recapture of $93,018, of which a large portion was for the basketball court that was supposed to be redone out here behind the town hall, next to the library, that was never completed. So the money, the project lapsed and the money came back. They're not really happy with that because that money could have been used for something else in that year. And now it's come back that it was never gone through. So I think that, and I want to say that was like 75 grand.
Wow.
So it was a sizable amount of money. think that's about all I have. So right now they have a total fund balance of $1,214,000 that they'll be able to use for appropriation this year. That's kind of where we stand.
What's in the open space set aside now that we spent?
Yeah, the money was, I remember they mentioned what the open space set aside was at town meeting, what the figure was. I want to say it was like around 2, do you recall, Brian, it was 2,
2 million,
2.5?
something like that.
It's in different buckets for each fiscal year, so you have to have a bunch of numbers, and I just don't know.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 2.5 somewhere, and then they took out that.
So what are the 5 biggest dollar amounts of the 17?
Open space at $450,000.
That's just a set aside.
That's a set aside, right? Looks like Woodlawn Cemeteries has one for $33,000 for the redo the gates. The piers are, for the gate restoration, the piers are rotting out. Acton Arboretum, China Trail and Garden for $14,000, and with the total, on that one, the total project cost is $29 to $30, but Friends of the Arboretum are pitching in money in town labor and stuff like that. Skate park expansion of $76,000 for the TJ O'Grady. And supposedly there is backing now from Boxborough that they're gonna come to $20,000, but that remains to be seen. One other one here that I have. Hosmer House, some grounds and some other stuff, $188,000 is the big one.
Wow.
Acton Housing Authority, $75,000 to create housing and for housing services, and $75,000 Sachem Way decking and siding project. So those are primarily the big
Okay.
ones. And one Habitat for Humanity for $53,000. So
Sounds like they'll be busy.
yes,
That's a lot more than they usually get.
exactly.
Other committee reports. Mike?
Yeah, 3 different items. Minuteman, those steel is starting to go up this month, which is, pretty cool. So the project's well on schedule. Economic Development Committee, last week we met with the 495 Metro West Partnership. They did a presentation about, business services that they provide to Metro West, and they had some interesting numbers on Acton that I could probably share with you. Have to copy it. For example, Acton, 75% of the residents have a bachelor's degree or higher, whereas the average in Massachusetts is 40.5%, and the average throughout the U.S. is 28.9%.
Sometimes it doesn't seem that way.
Actually, if you were interested in the total payroll of all the employers for Acton, from Q2 2015 to Q2 2016, the payroll for all places of employment in Acton was $609,167,640, which is kind of interesting. I mean, they have.
Does that include the town?
That's right.
Does that include the town and the schools?
If you pay taxes and if you get paid in the town of Acton, I would say yes. The number of employers in Acton has increased steadily. In 2001, there were 791 employers in town, and by Q2 2016, the number has increased to 851. So they have analysis who the top industries are and so on. It's kind of interesting. Also, do you know, ever hear of a company called Enernoc? E-N-E-R, capital N-O-C. Apparently they were given a big energy grant, and they're apparently located in Acton, but no one has ever heard of them.
I think they're on Powder Mill Road.
Well, no, this is the 495 partnership, so it's kind of interesting. Also, Main Street. our lovely property on Main Street. As a follow-up to this summer's public forum about development, where I think the most popular choices centered around a boutique hotel and some commercial development and maybe some senior housing. Matt Selby has applied for a mass development grant as a follow-up to provide, to do some technical assistance in doing market feasibility and financial analysis of that hotel. For example, if we did want to put one, how many rooms would it have to be economically feasible? Would it fit? What other kind of properties go along with it? And just the whole making financial sense of the plan, just to see if it's even doable. For example, originally we planned it would fit a 30-room boutique hotel on the site, but a hotel that small is really not economically feasible. It would have to be either 60 or 100 rooms to make it, to have anyone show any interest. So they're going to work on those issues and see what they come up with. So since we don't have any money to spend, they went to mass development, and hopefully we have a pretty good chance of getting this grant to do that study. So, we're moving forward, hopefully with our goal of getting our money back on that site.
I can save you some time. The traffic issues aren't going to work there, so.
Well, thanks. Other committee reports. John.
Two items. There'll be a meeting on Thursday night here, an open meeting, as a follow-on to one that took place in September, where Adam Winstanley, a Concord developer who's the preferred developer for Stop and Shop, will put forth some plans that he's put together for the Kmart Plaza. We had reported the last time he had tossed out an idea of combined residential and commercial use, so we'll see several more. There was a meeting on December, and that'll be at 7 o'clock here on Thursday night. We had a meeting on December 1 at 7 in the morning. This was called to review some revisions to the plans that were associated with the roads and traffic signals that our consultant had developed after receiving some initial feedback from the Department of Transportation. So break it down between traffic signals and roads. They will keep the existing intersection signal at 111 and 27. They will add 2 signals on Community Lane, one at the intersection of Community Lane and 27, that's by the Gulf Station, and one at the bottom of the hill at the intersection of 111 where CBS and TD Bank are. And then there will be a new signal that'll be aligned with Charter Road and 111 by the tennis courts and Baker Whitney. Then in terms of traffic lanes, there will be some lane changes. As you're coming down Mass Avenue toward Main Street, as you turn left, there'll be projected two turn lanes to speed, I guess it would refer to as added capacity, to decrease the wait time. So there'll be 2 left turn lanes there, and then they will merge into 1 lane proceeding north on 27. And then On 27 coming up from Maynard, as you reach the intersection with 111, there'll be an additional lane added where you can either go straight or take a right turn. What they're hoping to do on 27, the left turn lane onto Community Lane would be with the idea of eliminating the turn that you currently have on 27 and 111 heading down towards Route 2. So it's with the idea of kind of picking up the driving flow and decreasing wait times. You know, it's already it's tough because it's such a congested area and it's been so for so many years.
Thursday, 2 nights from now, 7 p.m.?
I'm sorry?
You said Thursday, 2 nights from now?
2 nights from now here, 7 o'clock. Come, that's particularly, Win Stanley's very good and very thoughtful, and it should be a good presentation.
John, do you think at some point you could get Andy to give us a brief presentation on what?
Of course.
Thinking our January and February schedules get to be full of numbers and financial information.
So we need a break in the
I would like
action.
to break it up with a couple of presentations. That would be one. Somebody talking about the Acton Housing Authority and Acton Community Housing Corporation would be another, because I know the difference, but probably most of you don't. So I think I spoke to Nancy Tavernier the other night. So I think it'd be good if we could get a few of these other subjects in before we go too far down the budget road. So yeah, just mention to Andy pretty much any time in our January, February slot that he could fit in. Town Manager Search Committee met, was it only Monday? Yeah, yesterday. We haven't been ignoring the Board of Selectmen. We meet every Monday night, is the way it's working out. We met with the search firm and gave them the information we had and our input, and they will have the advertisement and position profile ready for us to approve on next Monday. And then it will get put out into the various advertising media on 1st of January. So that's moving along. I don't think we'll have to meet so often once that's out, right?
No, we move from process to reality.
Other committee, yeah, Brian.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to mention the Board of Selectmen held their annual tax classification hearing last night with the Board of Assessors, and the assessors presented the various options under tax classification, but ultimately it resulted in a uniform tax rate, or at least proposed, of $19.38, up from $19.06 from last year. The single-family home settles in at about $566,000 and change, with about a 2.6% increase in that bill. So more to come on that. We met with DOR today, or a representative from DOR, to go through the tax recap. It's a very complex document with all the spending from town meeting. And I don't anticipate any problems. We have some memos we need to submit, but we'll keep you posted on certification of that rate. But it looks like it's probably going to be, within the next 4 or 5 business days.
Janet, is there anything you want to add?
I just thought I would to applaud your diligence on this committee, the search committee. I just wanted to let you know that, yes, the Board of Selectmen met yesterday. We opened at 7 o'clock. We adjourned at about 7:35. And I saw all of you in room 126 as Katie and I were going to discard all of our excess paper in the paper recycling bin. And I thought about stopping, and I thought, no, you all looked so happy working together. And
We couldn't figure out who could possibly have adjourned a meeting that fast. Nobody suggested it was the Board of Selectmen.
No, but that's who it was, chattering in the hallway.
Yeah, you're pretty rowdy, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike.
Did you want to comment at all on town meeting?
I don't know if I have enough time. I was happy with the results, but clearly we need to improve at least the check-in process if we're going to have that many people show up, or at least maybe keep the marijuana issues down to a minimum.
The moderator is having a debriefing meeting tomorrow with some of us to go over what went well and what didn't go so well and how to address it in the future. I mean, we have got at least one email complaint from somebody who perhaps doesn't go to very many town meetings and just said that the check-in process was unacceptable. But I've talked to a number of people who are regular town meeting goers who basically said it was astonishing to them that we all kept our cool and we slogged through and finished. And it was late, but I mean, generally, I think there were kudos from people who really knew that that was a very unusual situation, so.
Well, you had to assume, since it was, 1,300 people, or since we usually only get 400 people, that most of the people there hadn't been to a town meeting before.
Right.
Personally, I think we should make sure we have a pot article on every time we were voting for school funding, since the first article passed 92 to 8.
Okay. John had passed out this excerpt from the Globe about wealthy suburbs would feel the pain of the GOP tax plan, which, if you want to talk to it briefly, John, and I think.
Yeah, my wife had picked up the article out of the Globe and had it copied, and it's the thrust of it was in the GOP plan. We would lose deductions for state income tax and property tax.
Over 10,000, yeah.
Pardon? I'm sorry? Yeah, okay, but if you look at that, the concern was, would people, citizens in individual towns say, if I lost that deduction, that's going to cost me so much more in taxes, would I be willing to fund operational overrides, building overrides with the loss, considering the loss of that money? And I think that's a real issue that we've got to pay attention to. It was really mind-boggling. The average tax loss in Weston was $86,000. That's like a
They can afford it. But, I mean, the point is, our average single-family tax bill is $10,600. So, you know, people, on average, people would lose in this town.
$10,969 would be great.
Thank you. You're right on top of your game tonight. Any outreach sessions conducted since we last met?
No, but I do want to review. I do want to review who's on the hook for what.
Okay.
So the senior center is coming up very quickly. It's coming up on the 18th. Bob Evans is going to be covering it. It's at 12:30. Bob said that he was covering it, I believe, with.
Wasn't me.
He actually said that you were probably going to sit in on the side. You were going to be the third, according to Bob.
I could, but I didn't volunteer to be the second, that much I
Okay.
know.
So he had somebody listed as a second. Can I have a second? Do you think it was you? Okay. Yes, the 18th. Let me get.
It's after lunch.
12:30. 12:30.
It's siesta time.
Okay. Moving on, the next one chronologically is Conant, which is at 8:30 a.m. And John, you have already volunteered on that one. Okay, congratulations. I need a volunteer or two for 8:30 a.m. on January 3rd.
What day of the week is that?
Wednesday?
I'm looking to people who don't have to be at work that day. Retired people. Okay, I
I
guess.
can do it.
Thank you.
Jeez.
Anybody else?
I don't usually get up that.
It's good to try it again. Anybody else, Wednesday, January 3rd? I don't think the time is flexible. Meaning you could do 9? No, it's a preset time, sorry. Okay, Steve, you might have to do that solo. I'm gonna put you down, I was on the hook on that one.
Okay.
Okay, I've got 2 on January 30th. 10th. The 10th, right? John and Jeff, Rotary, 12:15. I've got 2 on the 30th. Douglas. Dave, you've already been voluntold on that one. Anybody else want to cover? If not, it'll be me. It's at 7:30, 7:30 at night on January 30th. Dave and John. There's a bunch for you, John. The junior high school, anybody got ties to junior high school? Be willing to do it at 7 o'clock on the 30th. I'll do it. You and me, Tom? Good, that covers that. Miriam has not gotten back to me at all. They deferred. I will ask them again, but at this time I do not even have a time when they've shown interest. And Gates has offered us March 12th at 7:30. It was going out a couple of months. Who would like to go to Gates? John? I'll go with John. And Roland. March 12th at 7:30 p.m. So the only one that's a wide open question is Miriam, and I have not heard back from the Metro West Chamber of Commerce. If you wanted to twist arms on that one the way you did for the Rotary Club, I'm all for it, but at this time I do not have, I have not gotten any responses back. There's been no interest shown. But thank you very much. I will actually send this out in an email so that
that's a good
everyone's got
idea.
it. So that now that we've got names associated, everything, we got it. I will also send out the final abbreviated point of view, and I made 20 copies for McT, and we went through all but 2. So that's all I have on point of view. Thank you all.
All right.
Is the abbreviated point of view, the final abbreviated point of view? Yes. Yes.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? We're adjourned.